Hey everybody, Jeff, your executive gardener. Thanks for joining me for another episode. So this episode is going to be about growing great tomatoes and what I do to grow great tomatoes if you live in Houston, Texas, or any other southern environment that gets a tremendous amount of rain like Houston, Texas does. Now the scene that I showed you before this video clip is an example of what Houston looks like before we're getting ready to get pounded by a big rainstorm. So if you're watching this today from Dallas or Houston or anywhere in South Texas, you know we're expecting hail, tornadoes, and a tremendous amount of rain. And I've lived in the Philadelphia area, the Phoenix area, Southern California, the Midwest in Kansas City, Houston, Texas. So I've lived in a lot of parts of the United States, and I promise you one thing. If you have never seen rain and you have never seen storms like you would see in Houston, Texas, nobody gets the amount of rain that we get, 60 some inches a year. And the veracity of the storms, the wind, the hail is unbelievable. Now I know people in Phoenix are saying, well, you haven't seen monsoons. I have seen monsoons. They do not compare to Houston, Texas thunderstorms. They come, the rain comes in buckets, the electricity and the flooding is out of control. And what that means for your garden is it can wreak a tremendous amount of havoc. So that means you got to give your tomato plants a great start, or the best possible start you can. So I'm going to show you what my tomato plants look like. I'm starting a few other dwarf tomato plants, and I'll show you what ingredients I use to try to grow healthy tomatoes that actually do succeed and are successful in producing a harvest despite all the rain and all the wind that we're getting. So in about 3 hours we're getting ready to get pounded with hail and rain and so forth, but hopefully my tomatoes will survive. So let me show you some of the new dwarf tomatoes that I have going on right now. All right, well, I'm getting ready to put out some additional tomatoes, and these are in the Orta seed starter, looking great. Take a look at them. So let me show you what I got going on here from a tomato perspective. These things, as you'll see here, are about ready to transplant into those little containers, and they've pretty much outlived the Orta seed starter. So I do have on the left here dwarf Egypt yellow. In the middle here, I do have summertime green dwarf, and on this side I have dwarf Tennessee suited. So I think I have a yellow when it's ripe tomato, a green when it's ripe tomato, and a red when it's ripe tomato. I'm going to try an experiment, which is that the birds are pretty good at going after my red tomatoes. So what I'm going to try to do is see if they go after nice yellow and green ripe tomatoes. We'll see what happens. But as I talked about earlier, most of the tomatoes I'm growing this season are dwarf tomatoes because they can be grown both in 5 and 10 gallon bags or buckets, or they can be grown in the ground. So when we have this weather like we have here, I can pull the buckets inside the garage while we're getting pelted with hail, wind, and rain, and floods. I can't do that if it's planted in the ground. So that is my plan. So as you'll see here, these things are doing great. No issues whatsoever, decent germination rate. Now, what I put in all my plants, and I'll put this here, and if you want to do what I want, great, but because of the rain and the unbelievable amount of wind, but mainly rain that we get here, more than just about any other place in the United States, except maybe Orlando, Tampa, Louisiana, Mississippi, you guys get as much rain as we do. We actually get twice the amount of rain in Houston as Seattle, Washington, if you can imagine that. So what I do here is a few things. Number one, I always fertilize my plants once they're grown every week or two with a Jack's tomato feed, okay? That is a classic 12, 15, 30 fertilizer, and it works very well. I also do a pelleted type fertilizer, which you can see there. It comes in little pellets. It's more of a timed release called Eco Scraps for organic gardening, tomato and vegetable plant. And this is a 5-4-6 fertilizer. So this kind of slow feeds. This is water soluble. You mix it up in a gallon of water. The instructions are on the back for each bag. And then lastly, really important, CalMag. So this is a liquid, it's a concentrated liquid, but it gives my tomato plants the necessary calcium and magnesium they need to make sure the plants are nice and green and healthy, and the calcium to eliminate things like blossom end rot, which I've had a problem with. Again, the directions are on the bottle. You can do that. And then I also, and I don't have it with me, I do supplement my plants with some green sand for potassium and some magnesium sulfate, which is Epsom salt. So that's all I put in there, and I mix it up with a very good potting mix. And that's it. So I'll show you the results of the tomatoes throughout numerous storms, numerous rain. I think they're doing okay. So that will show you the results and what we've gotten so far. Let me take you over to the side garden where the tomatoes reside. Actually, before I get to my side garden, let me show you some of the harvest. So all of these have come off of my tomato plants within the last 2 days. So we've got some cherry tomatoes, and we've got some medium-sized tomatoes and some decent-sized tomatoes. If we take a look at the green stalk garden to start with, this thing, I use the same ingredients in the soil. This too is just loaded with tomatoes, okay? I mean, tomatoes as far as the eye can see. Tomatoes, tomatoes, multiple tomatoes, tomatoes, pear-shaped tomatoes, tomatoes galore. Again, the great thing about the green stalk garden is that you do not have to weed it, and it's simple to use. So all the folks that live in apartments or condos, I think it could be really good for you to grow some fresh food. Actually, I have some bigger ones here somewhere. Here you go. You can even grow medium-sized tomatoes in here as well. And there's some there and down there. Okay. So Green Stalk Garden does a great job as well with the tomatoes. Let's take a look at the side garden. All right, so here we go. We've got 2 containers over there. Those, like I said before, if you live in Houston, you have this severe weather, you can, in fact, bring these inside. Prevent it from getting pelted with hail and extra rain. So this thing, and there's actually another one here. Let me get a close-up. I forget what this variety is, but man, this thing is probably put off, I don't know, we've got 25 tomatoes so far in it, but it just keeps producing. Anyway, this one also is loaded. Tomatoes, tomatoes. This is a Polish variety. I don't remember which variety, but again, it's doing extremely well. Seem to have taken care of the blossom end rot issue that I had in there. This one is just getting going with some buds. Got some there, tomatoes here, tomatoes there, tomatoes kind of just everywhere. And then another plant as well. Tomatoes over here. These are all just different variety. Now the reason they're all green is obviously I've picked all the red ones and we have eaten and devoured those. So all good. But again, I seem to have taken care of the blossom end rot problem, and these things are starting to produce just a tremendous amount of tomatoes. So again, these are in pots. That's in a 5-gallon pot. You can bring these things inside for the massive storm we're about to get here in Houston, Texas. So that's kind of what I do. And I would also say just a few other tricks if you live in Houston, Texas, or anywhere that gets a lot of rain. We do, as you know, because we do get a lot of rain, I think that as much as you can do, don't overwater your plants with your own watering bucket or your sprinkler system, because we need to expect a lot of rain coming at some point in time. It's going to come during the week. And if you water it and it also gets flooded with the rain, it doesn't give your tomato plants a chance to dry out. You know, tomato plants, you should water it good, deep, and then let it dry out thoroughly before you water it again. Again, the most important thing I want to reiterate to everybody is that with all the rain you're going to get here, you need to keep adding nutrients like I showed you earlier in the video. I would say every week, because the nutrients are going to leach out of the buckets, or they're going to leach out of the soil. It'll, you know, go from the soil out of it into the open space where I have rocks. It just takes a lot of compost or a lot of fertilizer in a wet place to keep your plants growing healthy. The last thing, and I don't want to forget to say, is that you see here's a tomato stake. Tomato stakes here. Everything in here, even in the pots, is staked up. The wind will destroy your plants. You see another tomato stakes there. Everything has to be staked. Everything you'll see there in the back there. If it is not, your tomato plant will blow over, the stem will break, and you will have no tomatoes. So be prepared for the 50-40 mile an hour wind gusts that will hit us this weekend in Dallas and Houston, or the southeast, anywhere you may be. Again, so if you practice all these things, you will be prepared for the wicked weather we get. That's all I have. If you have any questions, if you do garden in Texas, if you're having issues with tomatoes, whatever the case may be, leave me a comment. I'll try to respond to you as soon as possible. And I wish you much success in your tomato gardening in the South in a very wet environment. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. Share it with a friend. Until next time, this is Jeff, your executive gardener. Bye for now.